Okay, so recently, one of my favourite games of all time, and probably one of the better modern Resident Evil games, recently celebrated its anniversary, and if you haven't seen it already, I did stream a run of it to celebrate that kind of milestone a few days ago, so if you want to check that out, feel free. So yeah, today we're just going to sit and talk about Resident Evil 7, and talk about all the good stuff it did for the series, because it definitely did kind of bring the series back on track, and I honestly believe without this game, Resident Evil might not even exist anymore because of what was happening prior to 7's release. But yeah, without any further ado, let's just get into Resident Evil 7. Okay, so to fill you in on any kind of backstory you may have missed, and if you're newer to the series, you may not know this was happening, but from the response of Resident Evil 6 and the action-focused kind of game that was, people were concerned with the series losing its kind of image and losing its kind of, you know, its personality. Like, the horror was gone. 6 was like a balls to the wall action game. It made sense for the story at the time. It was like this big culmination of all the characters kind of fighting to save the world at this point. And yeah, it made sense for the game, but it was not. It was far from Resident Evil. You know, the atmosphere was gone, the horror was gone. You know, it wasn't a kind of survival horror game anymore. You were kind of just filled with bullets and action around every corner. It kind of lost its touch. So I think, you know, they really kind of looked at it and went, okay, let's take a step back, think about what we're going to do, and then come back with something new. And Resident Evil 7 was definitely that. So the idea of Resident Evil 7, I think, for the most part, was a reboot of the series, going back to its roots and kind of really drilling home that survival horror feeling the first few games had. So you had a new character, new environment, and it was very confined to a single house. There was not much ammo. It was old school. It was old school, and I think that really kind of revived the franchise as a whole. Now here's the thing, I'm sure there's people out there that do like Resident Evil 4, do like Resident Evil 5, and do like Resident Evil 6, and I do genuinely think, you know, if you like those games, good for you. And I'm a big fan of 4 and 5. 6 I can play every now and again, but 4 and 5 I really do enjoy. But for me, and I think for most people, the survival horror versions of the Resident Evil games are better. So you got your original 3, kind of Veronica, and of course Resident Evil 7, and I'm sure there's more as well, but they're the main ones everyone talks about. And yeah, I think returning to that style of gameplay off of the back of 6 was such a good move. Also a risk, just to kind of to revert back to like the old school style of play. You know, you've made Resident Evil 4, 5, 6, they're action focused, you've probably brought in new players because of those games, and then suddenly you've flipped it on its head and it's back to the old school way. And I'm sure, you know, the people who do prefer those games were a bit concerned with that, but I think it definitely was worth the risk and it definitely paid off. And yeah, it's like I said, I think without this game, we wouldn't have got like the remakes of all of like the games we have right now, or Village. Obviously Village is a different kind of kettle of fish, but we wouldn't have had the remakes do so well and stuff like that, because I genuinely think if they kept going with what they were doing with 6, the series wouldn't exist anymore, or at least it would be like a shell of what it was. I really do think that. But anyway, moving into 7, and specifically about 7. So the story was very confined. You know, it was a reboot in a sense. You know, there was no kind of link to the old games at all, apart from like the very end of the game. And you play as Ethan Winters, who was introduced in this game. And again, there's a bit of controversy on his character being kind of mid. I think with Village they improved him. But in 7, I think their idea was that you were the character, and you know, he didn't talk much in 7 compared to Village. You know, it was a first-person perspective, which was like brand new at the time, kind of. Obviously, there was like your on-rail shooters from back in the day, but a proper first-person game hadn't happened until now, and that whole side of the game has its own opinions, and people kind of do and don't like first-person. But I thought it was pretty good for the game because, you know, like I said, the Baker Estate is a very confined building. You know, it's tight corridors, dark hallways, all that kind of stuff. And I think it works well for first person. And again, having first person in the game really did bring the horror to the forefront. Even now, you know, all this time later, Resident Evil 7 has iconic characters. You know, everyone talks about Jack Baker and how that was such a cool thing they did, and loved how his character worked. And even the character, it's himself, like his character's personality and stuff like that. It was really well done. The whole family was good. There are obviously certain characters that people prefer over other things, but for the most part, I think most of the characters were pretty much, yeah, they were pretty well received, and you know, I definitely enjoy the cast that is present in Resident Evil 7. In terms of the ending of the game, so obviously spoiler territory if no one's played the game before, It does kind of try and reach into the overarching lore of Resident Evil 7 to keep it kind of in line with the mainline series, so it is a canon game. And it's interesting because a lot of the plot points that I mentioned at the end of 7 haven't been touched upon since, and I know it's only been Village since then, but there's some big plot points that are kind of brought up in 7 that just do not exist at the moment, and I'm waiting to see them come back because they have potential. I'm of course talking about the big reveal of the kind of Blue Umbrella company now, which is apparently like a re-established version of the Umbrella Company that is trying to quote unquote kind of fix what the old company did. Don't know if that's true, we'll have to wait and see. And then of course we have the Connections, which is like the shady black market bioweapon dealers, which we haven't really seen much about. Only thing we really know is who's kind of running the show, and that Mia Winters was obviously involved in that group as well. So that's all we really know, and again, they are questions that need answering, and I really do hope they get covered in the next game, because there's some interesting plot points right there. And of course, it wouldn't be a Resident Evil game without some controversy, and this is stuff that kind of came up around before Village launched, but it did really kind of pull back to Resident Evil 7, and apparently Resident Evil 7 was too scary. No, I definitely think Resident Evil 7 was one of the scarier games in the franchise. I think there's no question in that. It's in your face, you don't know what's coming, and especially on our first playthrough, you do get pretty spooked out fairly easily because you just don't know what's coming. And I think that's Resident Evil at its best. You know, whether it's 7 or the original trilogy or any other game in the series, those first playthroughs and those initial reactions to stuff is always the best. And I think Resident Evil 7 did that so well. And yeah, apparently the controversy was, you know, they toned down the horror in Village because Resident Evil 7, you know, it was too scary. People didn't finish the game because it was too scary, apparently. And I don't necessarily agree. Now, I'm very kind of conditioned nowadays to horror games. Nothing really kind of gets me. So obviously, playing enough horror games, you kind of get used to what's coming. But I can kind of understand it for people who kind of maybe don't play horror games as much and are kind of just playing Resident Evil games and seeing this game be a bit too scary. I can kind of believe it. But for me, I think maybe some of you will agree that Resident Evil games are better when they're scary. And that is not a dig at 4, 5 or 6. Again, those games are enjoyable. I really like 4 and 5. And again, 6, if you enjoy it, that's great. But I do prefer my Resident Evil games with a bit more horror. But yeah, that's just my kind of opinion. But that's always been a diverse opinion, especially nowadays with like the most of all horror focused games and the more action horror games. So that's always up for debate. But yeah, I think overall, Resident Evil 7 was definitely the breath of fresh air that the series needed, especially after the route it was taking. And I think it's definitely set the franchise up to be around a lot longer than it would have been. And, you know, with the success of this, and then obviously all the remakes that have come out and Village, I think the series now is in a really strong spot. And hopefully it sticks around for a while. And I think a lot of it has come down to this game and them kind of deciding to pull back on where they were going and kind of really kind of restart the series for new audiences, and I think it's done wonders for the franchise as a whole. And yeah, I have nothing really more to say. I really like this game, and I'd love to see what you guys think of the game down in the comments below. But as always guys, thank you for watching. Again, leave your thoughts on RE7 down below. Do you like it, do you not? Always let me know. And again, if you did miss the stream, it should be up on the channel by now, so go ahead and check that out if you want to. But yeah, thank you for watching, and as always, I'll catch you in the next one.